Here it is. This is the BARRICADE roof rack and cargo basket for the Jeep JK and JL, both the Sport model as well as the Unlimited models, that can be applied without any drilling and can carry a capacity of 150 pounds. This is the way it comes in the box, and we'll go through the unboxing process. So you can see how it comes packaged. They put some foam in there to keep things from jostling around and getting damaged, so that's pretty good. Obviously a pack of hardware. And pieces of the cargo basket. So this is the hardware package. These are some instructions that I printed out on my own from the website. And this is something. This looks like part of the rain gutter setup, but I'm not sure. And here's another one. So let's put those over there. And then some clamps. Now these look like the things that go on the rear of the rack to attach it to the window hinge. And clearly this is one of the devices to attach the rack to the window. So we'll put them together over here. And then another hinge. Let's see what else. Bunches of screws and washers and so forth. Hopefully they're labeled, because I don't know what the sizes of these things are just by looking at them. And a couple of more hinges. Oh, these are the ones that go down into the rear window hinge and hook up, and then it hooks up to the other thing. So let's get this going. And let's see what else is in here. And we have printed instructions, which I've already printed from the internet, but this is what they send you as well if you don't have a internet access. So here are the parts with all the bolts and nuts and what have you that came out of the packages. And I carefully numbered and placed each one on this sheet to check for any missing parts. And unfortunately, I'm shy 4 bolts, which I'll have to contact the company for. But basically, I followed the list, which is here. And as you can see, It's the 8 by 1.25 hex bolts, 4 of which are missing. I only have 12. And as you can see, they really mislabeled it because they called it a nut. But then right under that, you're supposed to have 16 nylon lock nuts, which I do have. So these are probably bolts and not nuts for the hexes. And again, I'm missing 4 hex bolts. And we'll see. As you can see from the little dark circles, everything else seems to be intact, including all the panels for the cargo basket. And as you can see here, I have the front brackets, 2 of them, 1 for each side. I have the LED light brackets plus the foam and rubber strips. And I have the rear brackets as listed. Then over here, I do have the 30 button head bolts. However, when you first opened the packets, there were 3 of them. There was this packet over here, and this little packet here, and then this packet here. So some of the 30 8mm bolts, 2 of them were in the other packet. So when you combine them all, they're all in place. Then I did find 16 8mm hex nuts here, and 8 1mm hex nuts, and 8 button head combo bolts. In this first package, there were also 2 Allen wrenches, a 4 and 5mm. However, there was an extra 5mm Allen wrench in the other small package. There were 30 lock nut washers, and I did have 74 flat washers, as well as 8 6mm by 18 by 1.6mm flat washers. The 8mm flat washers over here, which altogether made up the 74 washers that you were supposed to have. But these came in this separate bag. But the totals here, and then I did have the 4 1.25 by 2.5 25mm combo bolts here. And the 16 nylon washers, which I assume would match up with the 16 bolts. But again, I only have 12 bolts, 4 are missing. And I checked the boxes to make sure that there weren't anything had fallen through, removed everything, checked the ground, nothing fell out. Plus I emptied all the packets right here on this table. Then I also had the 8 by 1.25 times 50mm bolts. They are there. And this is what was in the small package. And again, I got an extra Allen wrench, 5mm. And this contains some extra flat washers and nylon bolts and small washers. So all of the hardware was included except for 4 of these. There are only 12 here. So what I'll do is proceed with putting it together and maybe go down to the hardware store and pick up some bolts while I'm waiting for the powder-coated black bolts to come in from BARRICADE. So it looks like all the parts that are supposed to be here are here. Then over here, I have all the hardware for the cargo basket, and these are all intact and accounted for. there was an extra faceplate here. There's the plain faceplate here. And then there's a faceplate with BARRICADE on it. And it looks like in the instructions you only need that first, you only need one first faceplate as a wind deflector. So I assume as an afterthought they started producing the BARRICADE logo here on this one, and they included that as well. I shall see when we start putting things together to see if there's a front and a rear faceplate. So with everything out and now knowing what all the bolts and nuts are and the proper sizes, we can go ahead and proceed with getting this thing assembled. I'm going to reverse the process a little bit. I am first going to put in the rear brackets which attach to the rear window hinges on the Jeep. And once those are in place, then I will assemble the rest of the rack and the cargo basket. And then hopefully everything will fit into place and I'll have a rack on this Jeep. Now, they say it's 45 minutes assembly time, but with someone like me who is not necessarily involved in constructing parts for Jeeps, this is going to take me more than 45 minutes. In fact, it's taken me 45 minutes just to unpack everything. So now I've returned from the hardware store, and I tried to get as close a match to the 8 by 1.25 hex bolts. And of course they didn't have metric, but 5/16 seemed to line up pretty well. Okay, let's see if we can get the rear brackets into the door hinge. Just to pop off, because this whole glass can fall out and you'd have to remove these hydraulics and start replacing the window again. So you want to be careful about how far you get out. You just want to loose it enough to slip that piece in. So with the rear window still up, you can see that gap in there. And you just slide this bracket in there like this. Under here, it should look like this. Then just screw it back in. So then you screw these back on, and it should look like this. So I will just do the one on the other side the same way. So now I have the two rear brackets on. That's the passenger side, and this is the driver's side. So we have to finish that with this bracket. Now this should point forward. The long openings point forward at the top, and the smaller ones fit over those two holes like that. And you use one of those 8mm by 25mm hex bolts, and two of the washers, and two of the nylon nuts, lock nuts. So this is how the rear brackets are set up, and of course the other side. So now it's time to attack the rack and basket. Okay, let's get started on the roof rack and carrier. So this is the completed roof basket. This is the support for the front of the roof that will go across the top and attach to the supports that are placed in the rain gutter. So there are 3 cross pieces, and I have put the wind deflector on the front. One of the issues I had was how these cross pieces went in, but I finally figured that out, in that you want the rough side to be facing up and the cross pieces to be on this ledge here, or this barrier, so that when the weight is applied, it's supported by the side piece. So now that this is done, the last step is to place the rain gutter supports into place, get them set up, and then the last thing is to put the rack on. So according to the instructions, you should, for a 2-door JK, you should put a marker at the 3¼ inch from the end of the rain gutter in order to approximate where to place the clamp and the bracket. So as you can see, I've marked that off. So I will put the rear edge of the bracket right there, like that. And then there's a mark on the other side as well, and that'll be the starting point. So you don't tighten these things until everything's in place, including the basket. Then get everything in position, level them off, and then you can finally go around and tighten everything. But let's see how this clamp works on the rain gutter. So let's get there, okay. And then that's a 3¼ approximately lined up with the other. So in order to get these things to line up, I thought I'd make a plumb line, because I thought they were lined up, but as I move the rope here, it's pretty close. Now, of all the parts that were in the kit, these extra parts are still remaining. And it looks as though the light brackets I didn't install, so some of these screws are related to that. This is the front bracket of the roof basket. This is the wind barrier plate that was put into place. Now, one thing about that, the screws used to put in this wind barrier plate, they only gave you 8 screws, 8 washers, and 8 nuts. So there was nothing left to put the barrier on the back of the roof basket. So I can't attach that using the hardware provided, because this should be able to go on the back. So it's strange that they only give you enough for the front wind barrier. And this is where the wind barrier on the rear would go, on the back of the frame. The other advice that I would have for someone is that when this is being set up, it's best to let this come all the way down, because that turned out to be the best position to have a level roof basket when the front brackets were applied. So even though you have some wiggle room here, you don't want to have this sticking up. You want it just to sit down all the way. And that seemed to work out best. Had no problem dealing with this, didn't have to take the screws out, only had to loosen them, and that negated any of the problem with this rear window popping out. Now on this front bracket, initially I thought there was a little bit of lean upwards on that bracket, especially with this rubber piece here to protect the rooftop. However, once things started tightening down, there was less of an elevation here, and it was more level, such that when I attached it here, the entire roof basket was level. So that wasn't an issue. The other thing I'd say about this, they recommended that for the two-door version, that this bracket be about 3¼ inches from the end of the rain gutter. And they were right on target with that in the instructions, because I measured out, as I showed before. I think you can still see my ink mark in here. 3¼ inches, and I barely had to make any adjustment at all to that when I put these in place and then put the roof basket on top. So that wasn't an issue. Now one thing is that with the two-door JK, you're using your T-top for the front mounting brackets. Therefore, in order to take off the T-top, you will have to remove the roof basket and then just lift the T-top off with this in place. However, with the four-door JK, the T-top is completely clear of the basket. So that isn't an issue. You can remove the T-top without touching the roof basket. So that's sort of nice for you folks that have the four-door JKU versus us two-door people. But not to worry, I don't plan to remove my T-top. So what I want to do is to get this on the road and then even put a load on that, and just to see how it affects the ride, if it affects it at all. But overall, I sort of like this roof basket. It does what I wanted it to do. I did not have to drill a hole in this vehicle. Everything I put on this vehicle, I could easily take off if necessary. If I bought another Jeep, a JKU, I could use the same roof basket without any problems.